In the aftermath of the 1967 race riots, New Haven's Route 34 and Oak Street connectors carved through two Black and immigrant neighborhoods, leaving a blighted urban scar for decades. Today, this space has been transformed into the New Haven BioPharmaceutical Corridor, home to luxury apartments, retail, parking, and bike lanes. But beneath the new construction lies a buried history of how interstates were imposed on communities, how urban renewal was fueled by federal funding, and how promises of prosperity often led to displacement and division. This paper explores the enduring impact of national urban planning policies, from the 1930s Housing and Loan Commission to the current bipartisan Reconnecting neighborhood initiative. The transformation of Route 34 and Oak Street reflects a familiar pattern in U.S. cities: redevelopment projects that erase the stories and needs of those most affected. The histories of the Quinnipiac Indians, immigrant factory workers, and displaced Black residents are obscured by the steel and glass of economic development. Even today, voices of those who keep the city running, educators, nurses, office workers, and doctors, are rarely included in decisions about what makes New Haven livable. In a country founded on democratic ideals, residents are often overlooked in favor of economic interests. This case invites a rethinking of who urban renewal is for and who pays the price. Richard Lee was the son of an Irish Catholic immigrant who worked for the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. His father was part of the wave of workers who contributed to the growth of northern cities between the Civil War and World War II. New Haven's industrial boom created a distinct urban structure, with affluent merchants residing near the commercial district while workers' homes clustered around factories and shipyards. Poorer residents, often recent immigrants or low-wage workers, lived on the outskirts or in overcrowded, decaying housing in the alleys and basements of the city center. This unchecked expansion eventually contributed to the physical and social decline of working-class neighborhoods as overcrowding and inadequate infrastructure transformed these areas, leaving behind deteriorated housing and impoverished communities. Even though the aging housing and infrastructure needed renovation and improvements, New Haven's city planning and redevelopment efforts focused on automobile access to the city as a destination from the suburbs instead of improving its residents' lives. Richard C. Lee served as the mayor of New Haven, Connecticut, for an unprecedented 8 terms from 1954 to 1970. His tenure spanned the administrations of U.S. Presidents Dwight D. Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Richard Nixon, reflecting the longevity of his political career and his ability to navigate national trends in urban policy, which allowed him to obtain considerable funding for his urban renewal efforts. However, pursuing these funds greatly influenced and even shaped his plans for renewal. In the early years of his tenure, Lee enjoyed significant popular support. The 1950s were characterized by optimism regarding the nation's ability to grow, lead, and embody democratic values. This spirit was fueled by economic prosperity and a belief in the transformative power of democracy. The charismatic Lee embodied this notion, and both he and the residents of New Haven were optimistic about the promise of economic growth, modern infrastructure, and improved living conditions. At first, his success in obtaining federal funds for urban renewal projects reinforced his reputation as an effective and influential leader. Citizens saw Lee as a local boy making good, and they admired his ambition and vision for New Haven, particularly in a post-war era when many cities faced economic decline and urban renewal decay. A team of outside professionals and experts primarily drove Lee's urban renewal efforts. The administration hired a team of experienced developers and architects to rebuild New Haven. For example, Edward Logue, who also led renewal projects in Boston, New York, and the South Bronx, was appointed as the city's development administrator, a role created specifically to direct all development-related functions. Several prominent architects contributed to New Haven's urban renewal, including Paul Rudolph, Marcel Breuer, Gordon Bunshaft, Kevin Roche, John Dinkeloo, and Louis Kahn, many of whom were affiliated with the Yale School of Architecture. In addition, most of the leadership of Community Progress Inc. (CPI), the agency responsible for implementing renewal programs, came from outside the city. The urban renewal bureaucracy was composed largely of highly educated, young white men, individuals described as the most intelligent and self-assured professionals to serve a city of New Haven's size. Drawing on his public relations background at Yale, Lee promoted his vision of New Haven as a model city through media engagement, political messaging, and strategic partnerships. National media praised his leadership, casting him as a modern, visionary mayor. His redevelopment campaigns promised public amenities, revitalization, and economic growth, supported by unprecedented federal funding and endorsements from key national figures. Yale University also played a public role in celebrating the transformation of New Haven. Despite this acclaim, citizen engagement in the renewal process was minimal and largely symbolic. Public hearings were often held after major decisions were already made, limiting meaningful participation in shaping the city's future. In recent years, critiques of Richard Lee's urban renewal initiatives have intensified, drawing comparisons to the post-Wellevue Marshall Plan. However, while the Marshall Plan aimed to rebuild war-torn European cities and revitalize economies, Lee's approach to urban renewal in New Haven focused heavily on slum and tenement clearance, often prioritizing demolition over the welfare of residents. This created cityscapes that visually mirrored the desolation and despair typically associated with war-torn landscapes. Once vibrant neighborhoods were reduced to piles of rubble, shattered bricks, collapsed roofs, and twisted metal. A striking photograph taken after the Oak Street demolition captures this devastation. A solitary street sign, bent and dislodged, stands defiantly amidst the ruins. Community members frequently expressed frustration over their exclusion from the decision-making process. Public consultations were often held only after key plans had been finalized, leaving residents with little influence or opportunity for input. This lack of engagement fostered widespread feelings of disenfranchisement and marginalization. In the case of Oak Street, many residents were forced to relocate with limited support and minimal regard for the emotional and social ties they had to their neighborhood. While Lee acknowledged the increasing hardships facing New Haven's Black community, his large-scale redevelopment and human renewal programs often failed to deliver on their promises. Although his leadership secured record-setting levels of federal redevelopment funding and transformed downtown into a modern retail center, these efforts frequently displaced low-income residents and contributed to long-term social and economic inequality. Lee's administration implemented human renewal programs alongside urban renewal efforts, aiming to address systemic poverty and social inequality. Ironically, while urban renewal often displaced communities, federal funding under the Kennedy and Johnson administrations introduced initiatives intended to mitigate these very disruptions. Programs like the Manpower Development and Training Act offered job training for unemployed residents, while the community action programs of the Economic Opportunity Act emphasized grassroots involvement and community empowerment. New Haven was an early participant in these initiatives, taking advantage of programs designed to support residents affected by redevelopment. The city received support from the Model Cities program, which provided funding to plan and implement comprehensive strategies focused on housing, education, and public services in low-income neighborhoods. In tandem, funding from the Housing and Urban Development Act helped construct subsidized housing projects to address the displacement caused by demolition and redevelopment. Community action programs were central to encouraging resident engagement. Community Progress Inc., the organization overseeing many of these efforts, coordinated a range of services, including youth job training, daycare for working parents, and educational workshops aimed at empowering underserved communities. These initiatives reflected a federal commitment to involving local residents in shaping the solutions to their own challenges, creating a parallel path of grassroots empowerment alongside top-down urban transformation. In 2021, U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal, at a groundbreaking ceremony for the 101 College Street project, stated, "Route 34 became a road to nowhere because of a broken promise, the broken promise of urban renewal." From 1980 to 2000, plans for the connector were abandoned. This period marked a shift in how transportation infrastructure was understood, moving away from expansionist ambitions and toward recognizing the detrimental effects of highway projects on urban communities. Although plans to extend the connector were dropped, the state retained the right-of-way for potential future development. This reserved corridor extended beyond New Haven's Route 10 and was intended to reconnect with Route 34 at a signalized intersection west of Route 122 in Orange. However, no significant progress was made toward achieving that vision during this period. The Oak Street and Route 34 connectors, once envisioned as part of a modern urban infrastructure, remained unfinished. These partial developments persisted as intrusive multi-lane highways, bisecting predominantly Black neighborhoods. Over time, these areas were neglected and left as physical reminders of abandoned mid-century dreams of progress, visions that ultimately gave way to fragmentation, displacement, and decay, awaiting renewed attention and reinvestment in the next century. Today, projects like Downtown Crossing and Biopharmaceutical Corridor development aim to reconnect parts of New Haven, once divided by car-centered infrastructure. These efforts reflect a national shift toward walkable, pedestrian, and bike-friendly urban spaces. In a city where 30% of households do not own cars, creating accessible environments is especially critical. Nationwide trends also show strong preferences for walkable communities, particularly among younger generations. Advocacy groups across Connecticut support expanding mobility options beyond car travel, reinforcing the need for inclusive and accessible city planning. However, many residents voiced concern over the approved redevelopment plans along Route 34. The development heavily favors commercial uses, offices, hotels, retail, and parking, while providing little affordable housing. Despite design elements that allow pedestrian and bicycle access, the area remains largely car-dependent and disconnected from adjacent neighborhoods. It is particularly isolated from the nearby Hill community and lacks social and cultural infrastructure that would bring meaningful value to local residents. The development tends to empty out at night, serving the daytime workforce of hospitals and pharmaceutical companies rather than the surrounding community. While New Haven has pursued more inclusive approaches in other neighborhoods, the Route 34 project highlights a continued disconnect between city-led development and residents' actual needs. One example of resident-led success is the West River Peace Commission. Since 1988, this initiative has worked with neighborhood organizations to create community-driven spaces that promote peace and engagement. The first Peace Garden, established in the West River neighborhood, transformed nearly an acre of urban land into a green collaborative space. Over the years, this garden became a community anchor and was later designated as New Haven's United Nations International Peace Garden in 2011. This work exemplifies how urban regeneration can be led by residents and rooted in local values. Initiatives like these show the power of neighborhood action and highlight the benefits of including green spaces and gardens in urban renewal strategies. In 2024, West River achieved a small but significant milestone in its revitalization efforts with the groundbreaking of a new housing development, the Reverend Curtis M. Cofield II Estates. Developed by the West River Self-Help Investment Program in partnership with the NHP Foundation, this project will bring 56 apartment units and various community amenities to the neighborhood. This development, adjacent to the New Haven United Nations International Peace Garden, symbolizes the synergy between new housing initiatives and the neighborhood's long-standing peace efforts. The project marks the area's first lower and mixed housing construction in over 40 years and represents a vital step toward a renewed and thriving community. This organization's network of peace gardens scattered throughout the city is a symbolic step toward reconnecting the neighborhoods. Today, one drives into New Haven through a very different roadway from Richard Lee's Oak Street connector and Route 34 extension. The once constant flow of cars and trucks now halts at intersections, where pedestrians and bicyclists cross the former highways using expansive sidewalks, designated bike lanes, and push-button signals that regulate the ebb and flow of traffic. The manicured and planted walkways primarily serve wealthier residents and high-skilled professionals, ultimately reinforcing socioeconomic divides and exerting pressure on lower-income residents in a city historically affected by poverty and inequality. Following the end of Mayor Lee's urban renewal efforts, and decades after the civil unrest of the 1960s, New Haven's current ethnic and economic composition is white, non-Hispanic, 32.2%, Black or African American, non-Hispanic, 28%, other Hispanic, 12.8%, white, Hispanic, 9.7%, and individuals identifying as two or more races, Hispanic, 5.99%. The city's median household income remains at $54,305, with 25.3% of residents classified as impoverished, highlighting persistent financial challenges despite the presence of Yale University. Yale, a tax-exempt institution and large landowner within New Haven, significantly shapes the educational profile of the community. While organizations like Urbanism, Biolabs, and Yale University promise scholarships and job pipelines to uplift New Haven's diverse population, critical challenges remain. Without deliberate and inclusive policies, these developments risk widening socioeconomic divides by disproportionately favoring affluent residents and highly skilled professionals. To ensure that New Haven's growth benefits the entire community, there must be a more substantial commitment to affordable housing, transparent communication with residents, and active collaboration with citizen action groups. Beyond the sleek biopharmaceutical buildings, where the old industrialized West River evolved into a Yale University rowing space, are newly built upscale townhouses turning inward, disconnected from the struggling neighborhoods of West River and the hill that border them. That older, neglected barren strip served as a silent testament to the displacement of immigrant and ethnic communities who once called New Haven home. How does New Haven honor those who labored in factories, cleaned the homes of the wealthy, scrimped and saved, fought in wars, pursued citizenship, and educated their children? They built lives here, bought homes and cars, becoming Americanized in so many ways. Initiatives like the West River Self-Help Investment Program offer a glimpse of hope. Through a network of community gardens and green spaces, these efforts present a vision of reconnection, fostering an inclusive environment where all New Haven residents can flourish. They, along with other groups such as Edgerton Park Conservancy, the Garden Club of New Haven, Walk New Haven, Gather New Haven, the New Haven Preservation Trust, and Art Space New Haven, serve as models for neighborhoods that honor the dreams, resilience, and histories of New Haven's diverse populations. This commitment to inclusivity goes beyond mere beautification. It acts as a quiet yet powerful form of resistance, reclaiming spaces for memory, healing, and renewal. Within these gardens and parks, the legacy of New Haven's former residents, from the Quinnipiac Indians to immigrant workers from Europe, the Caribbean, and enslaved Africans, persists, deeply rooted and nurtured by a community that values its history. By honoring the past while building a sustainable future, these spaces invite everyone who visits and lives in New Haven to grow, belong, and contribute to the ever-evolving landscape of the city.